So we're on to the next. I like to think of these as generations, but they're not really generations in the physical sense, but they're sort of evolutions in the kinds of things that we're able to do. So first was trying to figure out speech recognition. Then there was speech understanding, and at that point, you were really able to do all sorts of things. So I remember my first experience with this. I put together a small system that actually used Roberto Bisiani's processor. And what I was able to do is talk to this thing, and immediately what I said popped up on the screen. And I could keep talking, and it would keep doing that. Now, it wasn't like transcription, but actually it was a grammar that was put into the application that would understand what I was saying. And as you can imagine, at that point, if you can do that, then you have a system that can figure out what I said and actually do that thing. So it's possible to make things happen as opposed to simply talking at them. So that was a real revelation to me. In fact, I was in the lab and I got up, I went to Raj's office, grabbed him and said, Raj, you really got to see this. Today it's not very much. You talk to a machine, it talks back to you. But even then, just experiencing that kind of immediacy was very compelling. And it's been mentioned before in this session, in this meeting, how important real-time response is. If you don't have that, then it's not really spoken communication. It's kind of like leaving voice messages and coming back, maybe getting one back eventually. So so what I decided to do for this session is, rather than give you a nice long talk about me or something that I wanted, I would leave most of the time to the participants. And at the end, we'll have a a short panel session where actually I would like the folks in the session to ask each other questions and maybe entertain questions from the audience. It's really more of a let's find out something rather than let me tell you stuff. So if we look at what's happened, we're talking about a period from the very late 90s to today, starting with the communicator project and on to other things. One thing to say about the speech group is that research in speech continued nevertheless. The stuff I'll talk about is new things, but the fundamental work continued to be done. And some of the topics that now became possible to research included dialogue management, fairly complex systems that would be able to uphold a well, let me call it a longer conversation with a human. Being able to do stuff beyond language, and that's sort of a fancy way of saying multimodality. So when people talk, they do stuff like this, and you really want systems that understand that. And at the same time, you want to be able to use voice to make interesting stuff happen in the world. So for example, working with robots, you can talk to a robot and they'll do something. Unfortunately, they can do things like, we had this happen when we were talking to this 200-pound robot and asked it to do this. And instead of that, it did that, which involved rolling up to a storage cabinet and start banging against it, back and forth. And that was really scary, but that's what voice can do. It's not always benign and doing nice things for you. And more recently, we've been working on things like conversational AI, or at least what they call conversational AI. I like to also think of it as open domain conversation. You have systems that don't just know about train schedules or whatnot, but actually they can talk like we do once we get outside and start getting coffee. There's nothing planned, it just sort of happens. So, like I said, the session is mostly about the folks who are going to talk to you. This is a little bit about myself. Like I've noticed a couple of the other people here, somehow I started off in psychology and ended up in computer science. But there's a common thread. Very originally, when I was undergraduate, I did work in auditory perception. Then I came to CMU in psychology and started studying with Ron Cole, and we did speech perception. And then eventually this sort of mutated over into working with speech recognition, or at least on my part, trying to figure out how that stuff works, because I didn't know anything about it. I knew how to program a computer, but there's more to it than programming. So I want to mention that the people that were important to me here were my mentors. My first mentor was Ron Cole, who's maybe still in here. I learned a lot about how to do science, but then there was Raj, and Raj was really different, as people keep saying. He provided, and people have said this already, he provided an environment in which ideas could thrive. You can think up of almost anything you want, and if it kind of even not totally makes sense, you could try it. And Raj provided you the resources to do that. I think that was amazing. But enough about me. So this session features several alumni, really from a much larger group that were here. And I like to think of it as this is what, after a couple of decades, is what's become possible when you started to build on a very simple system that could, almost correctly recognize P2Q4. And that's awesome. But today we can do so much more from that concept proof.